In the Moroccan city of Setat in 2007, young nurse Salma was returning home from work along her usual route when a man stopped her, claiming to be a police officer and showing her an ID card to prove his identity. With calm confidence, he managed to lure her to an abandoned place where his politeness turned into brutality. He assaulted her, robbed her, and left her engulfed in darkness. In shock, Salma immediately went to the police station and insisted that her attacker was a police officer. But after being shown photos of all security officers, she couldn't identify any of them. It seemed the attacker would remain a faceless phantom until fate intervened. One day at the market, her eyes locked on his face. Without a moment's hesitation, she alerted the police, who arrested him on the spot. What Salma didn't know was that what happened to her was only the beginning, and that this man was not just an ordinary predator, but a human monster who, as the investigation would later reveal, was a serial killer who terrified Morocco for a long time. This is where the story begins, and the blood has yet to dry. In the official records, Hicham was nothing more than a man in his 30s who grew up in harsh conditions. His father abandoned him when he was just 3 years old, and his mother was forced to return to her father's modest home, a poor elementary school guard. Hicham grew up in humble surroundings and studied at his grandfather's school, but he left education early to work and support himself. He started in a bicycle repair shop, then learned welding, before moving into selling secondhand clothes. Dreaming of a respectable job, a steady income, and a better future, he moved to Agadir to work in agriculture, only to quickly realize that the effort was not worth the pay. He returned to Setat, making limited profit from selling used clothes, never enough to satisfy his ambitions. Soon, he sank into a world of cheap parties, alcohol, and drugs, spending all he earned on fleeting pleasures. It was during this time that his eyes fell on Salma, a young, elegant nurse who carried herself with dignity and passed by him every day. He became obsessed, watched her closely, gathered information about her, and learned she was from a respectable family in an affluent neighborhood. "She would never look at me if she knew who I really am," he told himself. That's when his sick idea was born. He decided to impersonate a police officer, forging an ID card using an old sports membership card, and one evening, he blocked her path to begin his sinister play. What happened next revealed his true face, a monster hiding behind the facade of a polite man. He was sentenced to a single year in prison for assault, but the police had no idea that an even darker chapter had already begun before the cell door closed on him. He had committed another crime, and this time, the victim would not survive. On February 11th, 2007, a local resident discovered the body of a young woman in an abandoned forest area. Her name was Fatima Zahra, in her early 20s. Quiet, hardworking, with no suspicious past. Her body showed signs of sexual assault before death, and the cause was strangulation. The investigation yielded no suspects, and the crime remained a silent enigma in police files. But the mystery didn't last long. Almost a year later, on February 14th, 2008, another body was found in a remote green area. It was that of university student Noja Mansir, beautiful in both looks and character. She was found in a position similar to the first victim, after being assaulted and strangled. Even worse, the killer had left her body in a degrading position, seemingly to humiliate his victims after death. It was then that suspicions began to solidify. A serial killer was roaming the streets of Setat, targeting young, beautiful women, vanishing without leaving a trace, and plunging the city into an unending nightmare of fear. News of the killer targeting beautiful young women began to spread through Setat, plunging the city into a pool of fear and anxiety, especially in every home with a daughter. One question echoed everywhere: who will be next? And why were all the victims young, beautiful, and killed in the same way? The police tried to reassure the public, but they had no solid lead. Then, on March 11th of that same year, a third murder changed everything. This time, the victim was a young woman named Nawal. Her body wasn't exposed as in the previous two cases, but the autopsy confirmed she had been assaulted and strangled. Here, the killer's shadow began to take shape. Investigators recovered traces of DNA from her body and compared it with the National Criminal Database. For the first time, a name appeared: Hicham al-Rawi. The name was not unfamiliar to the police. He had been convicted a year earlier in an assault case and had only been released from prison a few months prior. At first, detectives doubted that someone who had just left prison could commit 3 murders in such a short time. But the DNA match was undeniable. They began tracking Hicham, who carried on with life quietly, selling second-hand clothes in the markets as if nothing had happened. When arrested, he initially denied everything, but soon began to confess in an unsettlingly calm manner, as though recounting ordinary events. He admitted his first victim was Fatima Zahra, a former neighbor whose beauty had driven him to obsession. He followed her into the forest, strangled her, then carried out his assault. He spoke of Noja and Nawal with the same cold detachment, admitting he believed women like them were far beyond his reach in normal life, so he decided to take his share by force. What the investigators didn't yet know was that Hicham hadn't revealed all his crimes. A deeper search through criminal records for similar cases uncovered a fourth victim, Mariam Ben Hamdi, a vocational school student. She vanished in 2009 while returning from her evening classes. 2 days later, her body was found in an abandoned olive grove outside the city, strangled and stripped from the waist down, exactly in the killer's signature style. Setet was facing a merciless predator, and the more the truth unfolded, the greater the terror grew, for no one knew the true number of his victims, or when this nightmare would finally end. The investigators managed to extract traces of DNA from beneath one of the victim's fingernails. When they compared it to Hicham al-Rawi's profile, it confirmed the addition of yet another victim to his bloody record. Upon being interrogated again, he tried to dodge the questions, but then said coldly, "She wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't looking for her, but her appearance, the way she walked. I saw her at the market and followed her day after day, until I decided to trail her when she left her institute." The investigators decided to widen the scope of the case, searching the lists of released inmates from the prisons of Casablanca and Kenitra between 2008 and 2009, focusing on those with prior assault charges. But the search yielded nothing. In a later session, Hicham revealed a fifth murder that had never been officially recorded: a young woman named Jamila al-Taheri. She lived alone and worked in a sewing workshop on the outskirts of the city. He said he met her by chance, and for days they exchanged silent glances before he lured her to an abandoned scrap warehouse he knew well from his work in selling second-hand clothes. There, he assaulted her, strangled her, and buried her in a pit covered with scraps of old fabric. When the police went to the site, they found skeletal remains, an old phone, and a wallet containing her ID card. DNA testing confirmed the truth of his confession. A study of the case files revealed the pattern of a methodical killer. All the victims were young, beautiful women whom he stalked for days. He only attacked in isolated areas, choosing remote locations carefully: forests, farms, or abandoned warehouses, far from any populated neighborhoods. During the crime reenactments, Hicham recounted the events with chilling composure, sometimes with a faint, unsettling smile, as though he enjoyed reliving the moment of strangulation. For him, Murder wasn't just revenge for his romantic failures. It was a declaration of power over beauty, something he had always considered forbidden to him. In an extraordinary trial attended by journalists, activists, and the victims' families, the full evidence was presented, and the names of the murdered women were read out one by one, along with the precise details of their deaths. Only then did everyone realize that Hisham was not merely a killer, but a meticulously calculating serial murderer who carried out his crimes with devilish calm, leaving behind nothing but lifeless bodies and a shadow of terror that would forever haunt Morocco's memory. With a rigid expression and a confident tone, devoid of any emotion, Hisham spoke about his crimes as if recounting a dull story that touched nothing in his conscience. But what shocked everyone in the courtroom was not only his composure before the judge, but his insistence that he had never felt guilt, even describing his actions as happiness and dignity. For him, assaulting and killing women was a form of psychological compensation for his deep sense of inferiority. These statements prompted the judge to refer him to a panel of psychiatrists to assess his mental state. Hisham underwent thorough examinations, including analytical interviews and behavioral and neurological tests, to determine whether he suffered from a disorder that would prevent him from being tried as a person responsible for his actions. After a week of observation, the decisive report was issued. The defendant was fully sane, fully aware of what he had done, and entirely responsible for his actions. The court resumed its sessions based on this report and confronted him with undeniable evidence, matching DNA, testimonies of survivors, his precise field reenactment of the crimes, and his own guidance to the burial sites of the bodies. Faced with this overwhelming evidence, the defense team could only plead for leniency, citing the harsh circumstances in which the defendant was raised. But the prosecution was firm, demanding the maximum penalty and describing the case as one of the most heinous crimes in Morocco's history. The verdict was unanimous: execution by hanging. As soon as the judge pronounced the sentence, murmurs spread among those present, and tears flowed from the eyes of the victims' families. Some could not hide their relief, while others remained stunned, as if they could not believe the nightmare was nearing its end. Hisham was transferred to Kenitra prison and placed in a special wing for death row inmates under strict surveillance. During his years of imprisonment, he never submitted a request for pardon, nor did he show any remorse, instead maintaining the arrogant stance he expressed before the judge when he said, "I was only seeking my right. My share, nothing more." Although his crimes were committed over a short period, their deep impact continued to haunt Moroccan society, and they were recorded as one of the most horrific serial murder cases in the country's history. The Moroccan police reopened similar criminal files to ensure he was not involved in other cases, but no connection to additional crimes was found. Inside prison, Hisham was not spared the vengeance of other inmates and faced repeated attempts of assault, especially from prisoners who had lost sisters or wives in similar crimes. In a leaked 2015 report, guards stated that the killer lived in complete isolation, rarely speaking or interacting with others, spending most of his time sitting in the corner of his cell, silently staring at the wall. Over time, the case of Hisham al-Rawi faded from the courts, but the nickname, the Beauty's Butcher, remained etched in the memory of Moroccans, especially the residents of Setat, who had endured months of fear as their quiet neighborhoods became the stage for relentless security investigations. And the question that no one could ever answer remains: did Hisham commit those crimes driven by his feelings of inferiority and poverty? Or are some acts in life simply beyond any possible justification?